What if C.S. Lewis made films? I'm not talking about like if C.S. Lewis's books were made into films. I mean, what if C.S. Lewis was a filmmaker and he was writing original scripts and making original films? What would that look like? Obviously, this is kind of a tongue-in-cheek question, but I find it helpful to kind of take an artist that I love and try to condense what they did and see what it looked like to replicate that. I'm a Christian filmmaker and I love C.S. Lewis. And so I find this a kind of fun thought experiment to kind of see what are the things that C.S. Lewis does really well, what draws me to his work, what does it look like to kind of continue his work in a different medium. So as I've been thinking about it, here are three key aspects of C.S. Lewis's work that keep on coming up in all of his fiction. First, a respect for the art form. C.S. Lewis loved literature. His day job was as an Oxford professor. He loved the classics. He loved poetry. He wrote this massive academic tome doing an exhaustive look at all the poets in the 17th century. So he was very familiar with anywhere from Dante's Divine Comedy to John Milton's Paradise Lost, Pilgrim's Progress, and he loved to integrate that into his own work. A lot of his work is taking the classics that he loves and then kind of retelling that story in a way that included themes that were relevant to him. So, he writes The Pilgrim's Regress as kind of a riff on The Pilgrim's Progress. The second book of the space trilogy, Perelandra, is kind of a retelling of John Milton's Paradise Lost, but in a sci-fi context, but with C.S. Lewis's theological kind of vision and concerns. The third book of the space trilogy, That Hideous Strength, takes its title from a 16th century poem about the Tower of Babel. And he's doing these references not because he expects his audience necessarily to be familiar with all these classic works. It's not like Spider-Man, the new Spider-Man movie, where they include the Punisher and the Hulk, and they're expecting the audience to recognize those IP, and the fun is like seeing them interact. What I'm trying to say, it's not like a marketing ploy that he is just referencing these because they're popular. He's doing it because he genuinely loves the classics. He genuinely loves literature, and he wants his work to be kind of a contribution in line with the literature that he loves. So he's integrating and referencing that work, and he's letting it shape the stories that he's writing. So first of all, there would be a respect for the history and the form of that particular medium. Second, Christianity would be a central concern. I can't think of a single work by C.S. Lewis that does not have Christianity in some form as a central concern. Sometimes the themes are more conceptual, theological. Sometimes they're more devotional and practical. Sometimes he's doing it in a more symbolic way. Sometimes he's doing it in a more literal way. But always, some Christian idea is at the heart of the work. And I think that's important to hold in tension with the first point, because a love of literature could really overtake this Christian instinct. You can tell that Lewis was not just a Christian in a peripheral sense, but that this was the most important thing to him. Not that he was an Oxford professor, but that he was a Christian and that he wanted to take his love of literature and bring it into service of Christ the King. So all of his works always have some kind of a Christian idea or theme or topic at their core. From start to finish, from the opening pages to the finale, they are about some kind of Christian idea. And thirdly, mature themes would be explored tastefully. You especially see this in Lewis's work that is not directly kind of aimed at children, but you also do see this in the Narnia books, that he doesn't shy away from more mature themes like grief and death. In the space trilogy, he even starts dipping into some ideas around sexuality. In Screwtape Letters, he's looking at the demonic, which that definitely shows up in his Narnia works, when Aslan is killed on the stone table. And you get this in the movie, this kind of almost demonic, oppressive spiritual force. It's very evil. You kind of get scared when you're watching it as a kid. And that's present in his original book, that there's like a spiritual darkness. And yet it never dips into like being a horror novel or a horrifying story. It includes references to spiritual evil without itself becoming indulgent or grotesque or anything like that. He always explores these mature topics in a very tasteful way. And I don't think that it's because he's trying to just produce family-friendly entertainment. in the way that we kind of understand it today. I think he just had an artistic instinct that never wanted to delight in the grotesque or revel in it or become indulgent, and yet didn't want to shy away from these very real, mature topics. So I think exploring mature themes with tastefulness is a key aspect of C.S. Lewis storytelling. If we apply all of that to filmmaking, what I think that would look like is first, a respect for the history and form of film. So there would be a familiarity with the history of film, and there would be a willingness to kind of craft stories that are maybe integrating or referencing older films, not in a marketable sense. Maybe the audience isn't even familiar with these films, but simply because the filmmaker loves the history of film and sees the work as kind of one more contribution in the line of film history. Second, matters of faith would be of central importance to the story. So from start to finish, Christianity or some Christian idea would be at the core theme and heart of the film. And that could look symbolic, that could look literal, it could be theological, that could be devotional, but in some way, Christianity is at the heart of the story. And thirdly, the film would be willing to explore mature ideas, but in a tasteful way. In film language, we might say that the film would follow the Hays Code, if you're familiar with that. Just the idea that we're not shying away from things like grief or despair, death, even sexuality, but we're never going to indulge in those things. We're never going to delight in the grotesque. We're always going to be doing it in a tasteful way that is respectful of audiences and respectful of the way that the power of an image. So the goal would not be just to create family-friendly entertainment. It would be to have an artistic sensibility that wants to explore deep things, but always in a tasteful way. Now, of course, I'm not C.S. Lewis, but I love his writing, and I've been incredibly influenced by him, as I know most American Christians have been. And as a Christian filmmaker, I've tried to learn from C.S. Lewis what it looks like to be an artist and a Christian at the same time. Specifically, I've tried to do that in the most recent project that I've been working on called Pastoral. I recently wrote and directed a feature film that I'm going to be sharing soon online, which is why I wanted to start posting on YouTube more regularly. Pastoral is a feature film about an academic pastor who is struggling to connect with his new rural congregation. And from the start of the project, from the first draft, I very consciously was trying to integrate these three key aspects of Lewis's work into my own film. So what that looks like is, first, I immersed myself in the history of film, and I wanted Pastoral to be kind of my contribution to the line of films that I really respect and have really shaped the storytelling and visual language of my film. Those films would be, Frank Capra's It's a Wonderful Life, Bergman's Winter's Light, Robert Bresson's A Diary of a Country Priest, Carl Dreyer's Ordette, more recently, Kogonada's Columbus, and Paul Schrader's First Reformed. These are all films that influenced the storytelling, themes, and visual language of Pastoral. Secondly, I made sure that Christianity was at the heart of the story. So Pastoral is really a reflection and a meditation on the incarnation of Christ. That is the key theme and motif of the story. And it draws on theological voices like C.S. Lewis's The Great Divorce, Hanser's, von Balthasar's Seeing the Form, and even Thomas Watson's book on communion. And third, I set out to depict real mature themes like grief, mental illness, death, but in a very tasteful way. I wanted this film to feel honest and sincere, but never to delight in the grotesque or anything like that. So when I showed this film in theaters and to my church, there were students as young as the middle school, even elementary age present, and I never got any complaints, and nothing depicted on screen I felt was inappropriate for those ages. So I tried to limit myself to have a tasteful sensibility while also depicting some pretty serious and mature topics. I'm going to be providing a lot more information about this film in YouTube videos like this and on this YouTube channel. So if you're interested in seeing it or just kind of following along the journey, please subscribe to this channel. I'm going to be releasing it online soon. But for right now, if you want to watch the trailer, you can click the link that's should be on the screen right now. I am so indebted to C.S. Lewis that I thought this would be a kind of a fun experiment to try and kind of condense what are the things that I love about C.S. Lewis, what are the things that are recurring in his works, and what it would look like for a filmmaker to follow in his footsteps. So hope this was helpful, and thanks for watching.